Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's topic will be Alright, so today I'm going to give you a quick rundown on how I prep for music videos, and specifically how I get playback ready when I'm shooting at different frame rates. When you're first starting out, you're probably not going to get huge budgets for music videos, so you're going to be forced to think outside the box creatively to maximize the production value on a tight budget. One way I like to do that is to shoot stuff off speed. In a nutshell, off-speed shooting is anything that isn't standard 24 frames per second. So that means either slow motion, sped up, or even shooting things in reverse. But what makes it cool is that it still looks like the words are being sung at normal speed. What gets confusing when you're doing that is doing the math on the playback that the artist will be lip syncing to when you're shooting so that everything lines up perfectly in the edit. The first thing we need to do is figure out what frame rates we want to shoot at, so listen to the song a bunch of times and feel it out for what you think will work best. If we shoot at less than 24 frames per second, then things will look sped up. Kind of like those old black and white films that look sped up. It's because they were shot at 18 frames per second usually, but then they're played back at 24. Or if we shoot at more than 24 frames per second, like 36 or 48, it'll result in slow motion, but if we've done our math right, it'll look like they're singing the song at the proper speed. So speaking of frame rates, when I'm shooting low budget music videos, I like to use this guy, the Panasonic GH4 or a GH5 if I can get my hands on one, because it gives you a lot more options for frame rates and they're not expensive to rent or buy. A lot of prosumer cameras only give you 24, 30, and 60 frames per second as options, but as you're going to see, 60 FPS means that the singer has to lip sync really fast for it to match up, and 30 FPS isn't going to be a very noticeable difference in speed. So 36 and ideally 48 frames per second are kind of the sweet spot, and the Panasonic cameras seem to be the only ones that let you do that in the lower price range. They also have the option to shoot log, and you can do anamorphic desqueeze built right in, so they're a great choice if you're trying to keep things lean. So you can see here on the GH4 menu, we can select our variable frame rate here and go as low as 2 frames per second, which would basically be like a time lapse, or 12, which is double speed, and then you got 36, which is going to be 1.5 times slower, 48, which is 2 times slower, and 60, which is 2.5 times slower. If you're on a more expensive camera like an ARRI or a RED, you've got even more options for frame rates, and you can even dial them in with decimal values if you want to get super fancy. So now that we know what our options are going to be for frame rates, let's jump on the computer and create a reference video for playback. So starting from scratch here in Premiere, all I've got so far is the song that the artist sent me. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new sequence at 23.976 FPS or 24, doesn't really matter, that part's up to you. Then we're going to create a bars and tone. You don't have to do this, you could just do a black screen with the info on it, but I'll show you why I do it this way. I pop that on the timeline, and as you can see, we have this handy bleep channel in the audio layer. So I'll separate the audio from the video, then pop the song down here, I'll mute the bleep layer, and then I just put little cuts in the bleep every time the beat hits for 8 beats. You also don't need to do this, but this is especially handy when there's a vocal line or instruments that start right at the beginning. If the artist has a click track counting them in, then they can nail it right from the start. Once I've got that chopped up and ready to go, I pop a timecode generator on the video layer and set it to the start at the same place the song starts at. This way the editor has a reference for the exact part of the song that we're using. Then I create a new timeline for each frame rate I'm going to be shooting at. Pop the 24 FPS sequence on that layer and speed it up accordingly. So for 12 FPS, I set the speed to 50%. For 30 FPS, I set it to 125%. For 36, I set it to 150%. For 48, I set it to 200%. And for 60 FPS, I set the speed to 250%. Then if you hit play on any of these sequences, you can see that the part of the song we're at in normal speed is still displayed on the screen no matter what frame rate we're shooting at. You can also see why at 60 frames per second it would be really difficult for the artist to perform the song, especially if it's a fast song to begin with.
I like to dance in my underpants, and I like to flirt in my shirt.
Once these are done, I export each of these separately and upload them to Vimeo as private links, and then on my smartphone or tablet I can use the Vimeo app and make them available offline, so I don't have to worry about having Wi-Fi or using my cellular data on the shoot. And so now that I got these exported and loaded on my tablet, we're basically ready to shoot. So another thing to consider when you're on a tight budget is shooting a cool or unique location for your shoot. If you're in the city, you could find a cool alleyway with some nice character. If you're out in the countryside, you could find an interesting barn or an old bridge. Even when there are big budgets involved, you still need to get creative with the set or location, so you might as well start flexing those muscles now. For the sake of this video, we're going to come back and use this cool looking alleyway because on a nice day I know I'll get a nice even lighting in here and I don't even have to worry about bringing in lights. So this is literally all the gear I'll be using on this shoot. It's the GH4 with this Olympus 12mm prime on it, which gives me a nice wide frame, and the Zhiyun Crane V2, which is probably one of the cheapest gimbals on the market but totally gets the job done. So I'm going to go out there and shoot a bunch of stuff and then we'll jump back on the computer and see how it all looks. One thing to remember when you're shooting this stuff is to remember to show the timecode on the playback device at some point. This way the editor has some frames that they can use to sync up the rest of the clip, but it's important that you don't cut. Just roll through the whole song, or at least the section you're shooting for, with a shot of the timecode in there at some point before you cut.
He's advancing and enhancing his dancing, refinancing his glancing. He keeps lancing, dancing. Don't even, baby, don't even belong. 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 Don't even, baby, don't even belong.
In my underwear, in my
Okay, so we're back inside now on the computer. I've already imported all my clips into Premiere and done proxies if I need to. But depending on how your camera interprets the different frame rates, you might have to do it manually here before you go any further. So as you can see here, I've got some 60 FPS stuff that remained as a 60 FPS clip. So I just right click on it and then click here and then go assume this frame rate and set it to my project rate, which in this case is 23.976. And then once that's done, all I need to do is find the frame reference with the timecode on it, set that as my endpoint, and then drag it onto the timeline in the same spot and fully extend it. So here are some clips that kind of show you what the different frame rates look like when it's all said and done.
I like to dance in my underpants, and I like to flirt in my shirt. I like feeling you. I like to flirt with you, babe. I like you, babe. Ooh, don't you leave me, babe. Yeah.
He ain't prancing, he's advancing and enhancing his dancing, refinancing his glancing. He keeps lancing, dancing, 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 dancing.
so that's it for this tutorial. I hope you found it both mildly entertaining and somewhat useful. For some context, we basically shot this whole thing in about an hour, really without anything premeditated before Taylor and Gabe showed up. But one thing I do want to stress is to not undervalue your time. If you can make something that's both quick and high quality, that just means that your time as a creator is even more valuable. So yeah, you're probably going to have to do some low to no budget stuff like this at the beginning of your career, but at some point you do need to start saying no to the freebies. The main thing I want you to take away from this video is that you don't necessarily need a ton of money in the budget to pull off something cool. One of my favorite videos of all time was For Praise You by Fatboy Slim. Spike Jonze directed it and starred in it. I'll put a link in the description and you can see for yourself that if you have a great idea and a good network, you can make legendary stuff for next to no money. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love for you to give it that thumbs up. I'm told it actually makes a difference, but either way, I will be back soon with more videos, and I think the next one we're going to talk about 360 video workflow, so please subscribe if you do want to see more of this kind of stuff in your life. And if you did get something out of this, or you know someone who could benefit from any of the techniques I talked about today, please share this video. We'd appreciate that so much. And big shout out to Taylor, who not only performed the song for this video, but actually wrote the song when he was in high school. I'll put a link below. And Gabe for coming out and being a huge part of the creative process and doing some sweet dance moves in the background. So that's all for now for me, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.